We all took a vote and canceled your microphone.
Lost my subscription.
Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call the special meeting of the Budget and Finance Commission to order. If we could start with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Allen is absent. Commissioner Jesty?
Here.
Commissioner Marin?
Here.
Chair Castle?
Here.
Commissioner Woodham?
Here.
Commissioner Samples?
Here.
Commissioner Sherbin?
Here.
If you would, please stand so we can salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is to approve the order of agenda for tonight.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. Next item E, blue folder items. Are there any blue folder items for us tonight?
There are no blue folder items tonight.
Okay.
Well,
And then we have the documents to approve the special meeting for tonight. Is that the only thing?
That's it. Yes, but there isn't any blue folders related to that item tonight, so
Okay.
there's nothing there.
Okay. Next, we have the consent calendar. Tonight on the consent calendar, we have approval for the affidavit for posting of the special budget meeting for April 30th, and also the approval for the minutes from the regular and special budget finance commission meetings from November 28th of 23, December 14th, January 11th, and February 8th. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
so moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any excluded consent calendar items, Doug?
There's none there as well.
Okay. There are no items continued from previous agendas. And tonight we have items for discussion prior to action. We have our finance director, Wendy Colazo, here to present the fiscal year 24-25 budget input.
Actually, I'm here to introduce the city manager and welcome him as he takes in the input from this commission for fiscal year 24-25, and he's going to take the show away.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. How are you tonight? Thanks for gathering, and thanks for all your work on this commission. It's very important. Tonight is pretty low-hanging fruits, continuation of my listening tour as I go out and talk to the commissions before we prepare the budget as opposed to after. As you all know, this commission will spend some time with myself and Wendy and Stephanie, Doug. After we deliver the budget to council, we'll go through it with you in June, and I think we have at least one meeting scheduled, if not more than that, to review it. So you'll get another bite at the apple. Tonight is really just preliminary feedback, any input you'd like to provide, you'd like us to consider as we prepare the document that we'll be delivering to council here in the middle of May. Kind of on the front side of the equation rather than the back side. So no formal presentation tonight, just here to chat with you, answer any questions you might have, and take any feedback and make some notes if you've got suggestions you'd like us to consider. That's it. So I'm here at your pleasure.
What, do you have estimates yet on what we think the revenue will be?
Yeah.
Expenditures end up coming right up to revenue, so revenue is the driver.
Yeah, absolutely. I think revenues are going to climb much like they did last year, year over year. We'll see a little bit of growth on the TOT side as we see the Marine Avenue Hotel site come back online. Not fully online, but partially online. And we'll see a continued year-over-year growth on the property tax side of the equation. We're seeing strong results there. Our outside consultants is estimating another 3 to 5% growth in that particular category. So all in all, I mean, we haven't put fine pencil to paper yet, but I'm thinking we're going to see another somewhere between $2 and $3 million of structural revenue this next fiscal year versus current. Expenditures will grow. As this commission's aware, we have approved multiple labor agreements this fiscal year that will flow into next year. So we'll see, a fairly significant adjustment to personnel costs year over year, as anticipated as part of those negotiations. Fairly manageable, though, I think. I see us being close to structural balance next year as it pertains to projected salary expenses and revenue growth. The one caveat that this commission's aware of course, is our unfunded accrued liability payment. We're going to need to actually write another check for that next year, right around the $2 million range, I think, depending on how much negative amortization we want to address. So we'll probably pull from one-time sources or recommend from one-time sources to cover that gap for now as we kind of ease into that longer-term change. But yeah, some steady revenue growth, I'd say, but not earth-shattering. Mild growth on the sales tax side, but again, as this commission knows, not been a real bright spot for us over the last few years, relatively flat there on a performance basis. UUT, I think, relatively flat. But we'll sharpen the pencil over the next couple of weeks and get those projections out. But I'm predicting somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range when you factor in charges for services and some of the other fees that will be coming online.
What about capital projects? We've heard talk about a new city hall, new police building, new fire stations and all that. What does that look like?
Yeah, new would be great, but I'd just be happy with renovation. There's been some talk, and in fact, several of your colleagues on other commissions have raised this issue in our conversations. There's chatter in the community for the first time in a while. A serious consideration, I think, of us maybe exploring a general obligation bond to help provide capital resource. As you all know, we have limited borrowing capacity for lease revenue bond issuance. Anytime we issue a lease revenue bond, we've got structural debt service that hits our general fund on an ongoing basis, much like we did with the pension refinancing a few years back. General obligation bond would ultimately place that burden if it were to be something the community was supportive of on the property tax rolls, but that would potentially provide capital that we could use to make much needed infrastructure improvements in our police, fire, and civic infrastructure, particularly our buildings here. So that's been discussed, not formalized yet. We're in the exploratory phase. We're going to prepare a budget response report for the council to talk about kind of on an order of magnitude basis, provide a bit of a needs analysis as it relates to renovation versus reconstruction of our key buildings, particularly Fire Station 1, Fire Station 2, the main police station, the annex, and then this city hall here, Public Works Yard, perhaps as part of that exploration as well. We're going to talk about what those needs are, and then talk about what a geo bond would look like from a milestone issuance standpoint. What are the major steps that would have to be cleared and what that timing would look like. You've probably heard that the school district is seriously considering another bond issuance this year. I'm hearing 300 million of late. Now that number's not finalized. I think they're still considering it as well. But as you hear about those numbers, you think to yourself, okay, if there's an appetite for that, boy, we certainly have significant need here in the city as well. And if the residents are willing, I think we've got some pretty worthwhile projects. So we'll see where it goes. Really, as I said, just getting that analysis to council, giving them at least some information so they can make a fully informed decision as to whether or not to pursue it.
But when we did the bond issue on CalPERS, we were actually saving money. And
we were saving money.
You're just talking now about revenue and expense being close to the same. So there's got to be savings somewhere in order to pay for that debt service if we borrow money.
Well, if we borrow, that's why I think there's limited capacity on a lease revenue bond basis, right? Borrowing for us, to put it in sort of rough terms, every $10 million we raise through a lease revenue bond, we've got about $500,000 of ongoing capital debt service for the next 25 years plus. If we issue a geo bond, right, it wouldn't be a lease revenue bond, it would be a general obligation bond that potentially would be covered through property tax assessment. That totally different equation. Then the voters are voting on it. Depending on how we structure the issuance, there'd have to be either a 55% voter threshold or a 2/3 voter threshold, depending on the specificity of the project. But again, just exploration at this point, no direction from council to pursue that yet, just some chatter in there, hearing from some of the commissions, hey, should we consider that? Should we explore that? Is there a need? What would it cost? So we're going to flush that out, and I imagine that'll be part of the budget deliberation this year. Any other questions or comments?
Right.
Thoughts?
What's the
Yes.
latest on the fire department? Is it
still considering going to LA County versus the remaining part of the city?
There was the third-party study was presented to council last month. They took that information in, they asked that the item come back for second consideration on May 21st, and the council will make a decision there, at least as it pertains to the concept of county versus city operation. There's also a component of the report that'll come back later that discusses sort of master planning efforts associated with ways to perhaps improve the department's operations, modify operations, facilities, et cetera. So kind of two-part conversation. They're splitting the parts. The next step's going to be a review on the 21st.
So how will it affect the budget if?
This upcoming year won't affect it at all. No plan change for 24, 25 at this juncture.
Would that somehow change the needs in terms of a new fire station for 1 and 2?
No, it doesn't. Under the county, good question, but under the county model, the city is ultimately responsible for those costs as well. So
Okay.
it's our burden one way or the other.
Okay.
Well, there are some things in the consultant's report that actually do talk about costs in our fire stations, both short-term and long-term.
Yep.
It has to do with staffing, ADA.
Yep. There are some facility improvements they lay out.
Gender,
Yep.
and also the fact that if we keep our own fire department, we need to find a place to house some of our ancillary staff because there's insufficient space in the existing fire stations.
That's
How is that going to actually play into your budget report to the council?
So they lay out a couple of suggested facility improvements. One that you're also referring to is perhaps relocating the administrative staff so you could grow out the living quarters in Fire Station 1 and alleviate some of that pressure. The cost analysis that we'll provide that will go into the bonding equation and discussion will be full renovations of those spaces as well as a reconstruction option to see kind of the delta there. It would address all of the things that are identified in the report, whether it be the ADA issues, living quarter improvements, enhancements to the restroom facilities, administrative offices, et cetera. Those would be discussed through that capital fundraising conversation.
But you're talking about these costs wouldn't be incurred in the coming fiscal year. They would be in some future year.
They would be in a future year. Yeah, we won't be ready. Even if we got out and let's say the community was very supportive of a bond and said, hey, go for it. You got 65-year-old facilities. We see the value. It's time. Let's do it. That's a full fiscal year of planning, issuance of bond. Fastest we could probably get to in front of the voters would be either November or next March. Once those bonds are issued, you still got the design of the facilities, you've got the construction bidding and all of the public works components of those renovations. So we will, in our budget this year, be proposing some addressing of immediate tenant improvements that might be warranted. We already have a couple of projects in the queue that are working their way through now, window improvements at Fire Station 1, as an example. We might see some additional interior cosmetic improvements to buy some time at the different facilities. We've actually executed multiple interior improvements at the main police station, report writing room, conference rooms, break rooms, communication center, admin offices. I mean, we've made quite a few improvements. Records, front lobby, exterior don't look any better, but if you're in other spaces there in the building, you'll see some changes. So we'll probably, our own capital plan will have some funding for facility improvements, but the big money would take a few years to execute.
Is the Budget and Finance Commission going to have an opportunity to review all the material for the fire department study before it goes back to the council?
No, not the way the motion was written, not the way the motion was provided last month. It's going to the council on the 21st. There will be an opportunity potentially for the commissions to review certain elements of the master plan improvements that were suggested through the study at a later date, but that's not occurring before the May 21st discussion.
Well, the first time around when it was a preliminary study, Budget and Finance was intimately involved in it. And now we're at the second phase, and it sounds like it's much more detailed, and we're not going to be involved until after the the council makes a decision?
Not involved prior to the May 21st conversation.
Is there a special reason for that?
That was the directed motion.
And what's going to, the decision on the 21st, is that going to be a decision is that a go or no-go decision, or is that?
The council will have options. It'll be to provide direction on next steps associated with the operation and the study itself. It could go in a variety of ways. They could conceivably make a no-go decision at that point. They'll have that choice, uncertain as to exactly what direction they'll give.
Well, the questions I heard at the first meeting and the questions I've heard from my councilman since then suggest that there's still a bunch of unknowns and to be decideds, and it's hard to see how they could make a decision either way on the 20th. That's 3 weeks from today.
I think it depends on your perspective, and each council member has read the report and they have different impressions of its impact, different impressions of the value, the cost. So I think it's an individual feeling, and if you ask them, I think you'd get different responses. So the motion is very clear. It's to come back on the 21st, have a bifurcated discussion. There, as I said, the Citygate study has sort of two components. It analyzes the cost delta between county operations and city operations. It also provides suggestions on ways to further make the department more efficient, or if the city so desires, supplement or enhance service in different ways as well. That is happening at a later date, and it could conceivably include commission input at that time.
But the consultant study doesn't compare what if we stay and what if we go. It says this is what happens, this is how much it costs, but it doesn't compare the nature of services. So it compares costs without comparing services.
It's sort of,
And
yeah.
the other part of it is that it outlines a number of areas that we need to work on without actually including those costs and what it takes to stay.
Well,
And I guess the last item I have for you is I read the entire agenda for the city council, and I see that we've got the consultant's report. We have a one-page cost summary from the county, and we don't have the county's proposal. Is there a reason that we don't have the full text of the county's proposal?
yeah, that's been in all of the prior materials. So when we ordered the study, the county's proposal was part of that. It's built into the analysis. That's been through prior agenda items.
So they didn't provide any additional detail into how these services would be provided. They just said this is the new cost.
Exactly.
And there was no discussion between the city and the county of what we need, what we want, and what they're proposing, or why they're proposing some of the staff cuts, for instance.
Yeah, there was not, the direction was a third-party review. In fact, staff really facilitated that. We're sort of hands-off on opining on preferences in one way or the other. The goal, and I think to answer the first part of your question, the goal of the study was to evaluate the service options. So what you'll see in there is commentary on the city's delivery of service, while it talks about, from Citygate's perspective, while it talks about areas where we can further enhance standards of coverage, it generally is very effusive in praise for the quality of our operations. I mean, the fact that we're a Class 1 department, we are at the 90th percentile for response times. If you read the document, it basically says city is providing very high level of service. What it also does is it doesn't critique the reduction in service delivery model that the county has proposed. It's simply saying the county's model would also adequately serve the city. It doesn't really go into one pro forma or one version is better than the other. It sort of just leaves them as equal in that scenario and then points to cost. That's the way Citygate ultimately decided to decipher the material rather than to try to, I think, cross-compare each of the models. It talks about standards of coverage. It talks about how there would be a reduction in an engine company. It acknowledges those things, but it generally says, hey, both departments do a great job. Both departments would serve the city well. Here's the cost. That's kind of, they summarized it that way if you read the document. There's a lot of information in there. If you get a chance to go through it all, it's pretty voluminous report.
I understand it very well.
Yeah, as I imagine you would, given your background. So yeah, it's the next step's the 21st, and council will make a decision as it pertains to that, or give us at least direction on next steps, and then we'll go from there. But not necessarily weighing into my budget presentation coming forward. Any other thoughts, comments?
Any other questions?
There was one item that I read about the police looking at the prospect of putting a military-style firing range in
Oh, the gun range?
the
Yeah.
gun range. And I just wondered, what was sort of the origin of that? Was kind of I hadn't heard about it for, except for about a month prior to this. But apparently it had been talked about or evaluated for some couple of years prior. So I just wondered if you'd give us a little bit of background on that.
Sure, happy to provide a little bit of context. It's a project that's been in our capital plan for a couple of years. You drive by the facility now, you go down Barrel, you listen to it, it's definitely not state of the art. It's an old outdoor range. It's been around for many, many years, predates most of the structures around that part of town, including predates the elementary school that's directly across the street in the city of Torrance. The facility, we've made modifications to what types of material we shoot, the bullets that we shoot at the range. We no longer shoot lead material. We have frangible ammunition. We have a modern trap to capture those bullets when they are shot. So from that perspective, the facility was modified a few years back, but as this group knows, as any of our residents know, there's no sound attenuation there. The facility, the noise just emanates out the top of the structure. The panels that are there are starting to further erode and fall apart. So they're, we lose them periodically in windstorms and the like. So there's capital project to look into pre-designing of a replacement facility to determine what the sort of costs would be if we were to ultimately build a new range. We looked at the most cost-effective option, which is to bring in modular structures, kind of a small lane component, 4 lanes as an example, built pre-engineered buildings that would be dropped onto a foundation and a pre-plumbed pad. And what we found is even that expenditure was fairly significant, several $1 million. And it also has an impact on the parks yard. The parks maintenance yard is co-located with the range there. So changes to that structure have the potential to affect park operations. We heard about a grant that the federal government has through our local Space Force group, where the government will pick up 70% of the tab, assuming the new range meets their criterion, which expanded the nature of the facility a touch, not a ton, but a touch. So then we did some studying to determine, does the site, the facility layout, could it be accommodated inside the footprint of our yard space there? And we ultimately determined that it could, but it forced us to relocate the Park Service yard entirely, move it from its current location to kind of a more exterior location in the yard area. That drove the price up fairly significantly. So between the enhancement on the size and length of the range that would be required to meet the federal standards, as well as moving the parks yard, the cost went from, $5.5 million if we did a kind of our own small range to roughly $17 million. But the federal government would pick up 70% of that cost. So they'll cover roughly $12 million of that expense, and our net cost would be about $5 million. So you sort of, under both models, have about a localized city expenditure of roughly $5 million. But under the one model, you've got a federally approved standard that's larger and a brand new parks yard at predominantly federal expense. So The council gave us direction to continue to sort of explore that grant, figure out if there's a way to offset the local match requirement, the 30% $5 million match requirement that would be part of that, and determine if there's another way to fund that through additional grant resources to perhaps have the site fully funded through external monies. So we're in the exploratory phase there. We are pursuing a few leads. There's actually a waiver that can be obtained at the federal level if one of the secretaries of the major DoD departments determines that there's great need. There's a way to waive the match, the local 30% match. We're kind of trying that angle right now. It's probably a long shot, no pun intended. But we're seeing if maybe we can get this picked up entirely on the federal tab. Obviously, we're donating the land. We're clearly, we're committed to operations and the like, but the partnership could bear some fruit for us, but we need a few more things to fall in our lap.
Just a couple of quick ones then too. One is that I assume that the fact that it has government participation, then we would be obliged to entertain government shooters there also. It wouldn't just be for the Redondo Beach
Correct.
Police
Yes,
Department.
it would be. We would also. That's the partnership would allow the Space Force military personnel, the MIPs, to train there. I think ideally, from the federal government's perspective, it would also allow any of the facilities, the naval facility down in Seal Beach, out of Long Beach. There's a couple of federal service groups that would potentially train here that currently have to drive all the way to March Air Force Base out in Moreno Valley to actually train. So there's cost savings for them potentially as well. So they're really excited about the
I
prospect.
can understand that they would be.
Yeah, they're excited about the prospect.
What do the kids across the street think about it at the elementary school?
Well, so right now, we don't shoot during the day.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do is we tell our officers you can only
Shoot
train.
people at night.
Now, no,
All the residents are out there.
we practice shooting at the range in evening hours only, which, sadly, it's good for the students at Towers. It's bad for the neighborhood because you hear these shots in the evening. These facilities would be all enclosed. And what we understand through our consultants and engineers is you wouldn't hear any of the firing. You might hear a little bit of noise, slight pop escape the HVAC, depending on doors, but by all accounts, the ambient noise would outweigh that.
Is there any planning on the staffing? In other words, who would be picking up the operating cost as we kind of went forward with this?
Yeah, we have the operating expense today, largely. Those could change. Certainly, utility costs would go up and the like. But through a joint use agreement, some of that would be shared by our partner agencies.
Because I imagine it would require full-time staff there. They're just not going to turn people loose in the facility and say, go shoot.
Well, it depends. I think you'd probably start using badge technology. We wouldn't certify, our range master wouldn't certify military personnel anyway. So the military would need access to the facility, and I think we could do that through key entry and carded access. And then they would be responsible for their utilization. Now, we would have daily cleanup, we'd have janitorial, all of those costs we would bear, we would manage. But I don't think we would necessarily supervise the military's use of the range. We wouldn't have that obligation, at least as far as I can tell. So,
Thanks.
Yeah, no, good questions, though. It potentially could be a really win-win project, but quite a few hurdles still to go.
The whole idea of an open air range is kind of scary. I understand why we might be forced into that, but the question is suggesting, what if we do away with the range entirely? Where would we go? Where would we send officers to train?
We would be out in Riverside County for the most part. We've explored local partnerships with Torrance, Manhattan. Our number of personnel accessing their space, gaining entry, it just doesn't work. Torrance told us they could accommodate us during the course of construction perhaps, but not on a long-term arrangement because that was the first thing I had asked. I asked Joe actually to research that himself. I said, look, find out if we could partner with Torrance. If we just, pay them kind of a share of their operating expense, maybe we can solve this problem immediately. There's just too many egress ingress issues with that. Most of these facilities are inside police stations that have jails. other your personnel comings and goings, plainclothes detectives. Not everybody, when they're training, is shooting and coming in an officer uniform. So you have to identify yourself. It just becomes a little problematic from what I understand. But if we didn't have a range, we already, for certain weapons, we already send them to a longer range facility. I don't know exactly where. It's a county facility. And I'm not even sure it's LA County. It might be Riverside County. It's one of the two or both. But my understanding is our training, our day-to-day training, our daily range requirements or monthly range requirements would become a little more costly. We'd have to send people off on overtime to train.
How frequently does a police officer take practice in a range?
I believe we're qualifying, I'm going to say on a monthly basis to keep up their qualification.
So it could be expensive and time consuming to send everyone
It
once a
is,
month
yeah.
to Riverside.
Joe tells me that it's, and the command staff regularly mention that there's quite a bit of efficiency in having a local facility that is your own. There's value in that on an operating basis. Do those costs, does that value, is that worth, millions of dollars in investment? That's why ultimately we're pursuing these grant resources to perhaps, ideally we like spending other agencies' money where we can. So there's definite benefit and value in having a range in our community, and there would absolutely be value and benefit in having a range that was indoor rated and would allow us to train during the day, because our current limitations on training are a bit problematic.
And you said that they are not allowed to train at all during the day, just given that there's
During school hours, no.
Right.
They can train during the day on the weekends, but
Right.
not on the weekdays.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you hear it. Anybody that lives near there, you can hear it. I mean, I remember the first time I heard it from my house. It's like, was that somebody dropped 2x4s out on 190th and are their trucks just running over them? Oh, no, wait, that's our officers firing at the range. Depending on the wind pattern, it can be.
So some people live close to pickleball noise and some people live close to fire range noise.
It does put it into perspective. Yeah, that's a good point. So.
Just wondering too, is the cancellation of that Beach Life Festival going to be impacting us in any way?
Not really financially. It's the fall festival that's being canceled. There is Beach Life occurring this weekend. The 3-day festival in May is happening actually Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this week. The fall festival, there's a lot going on with the operator, his business group. They're currently renovating the old Rubies and On the Rocks buildings to make way for the California Surf Club concept that's coming, and there's at least 4 down there. That's consuming a lot of their energy. They've got an investment happening in the Riviera Village. Only Alan could tell you exactly what motivated him to rethink this fall's festival, but you might have seen the article in the Times. There was discussion about the saturation of the festival market, music festival market right now. There's so many different events in the region. I mean, just about every weekend you can find a music festival. It used to be there's Coachella and, maybe a couple more, and that was it. Now there's stuff happening throughout Southern California, certainly monthly and almost weekly, particularly during the summertime. So I think he just made a conscious decision to maybe take the fall off in its normal format, see if they can rethink it a little bit and figure out where they're going to go next. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Thanks for
Thoughts?
coming.
Yeah, thank you.
It's always good to see you all. Appreciate it. And thanks for your work. Sorry you had to call a special meeting for this to occur. I guess you'll be back here in May doing your thing, and we'll see you after the budget for sure. We can go through it, any questions you have, and we'll be talking. So it looks like on the calendar, I'll be in front of you on the 13th of June after we've delivered the budget. And
13th.
is that right? Am I getting that right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
June 13th, and then you've got your regular meeting next month where I think you're just doing quarterly review, you're talking current budget, so.
Yes, sir.
Mike, just one further one. Will we be getting any kind of written material to review?
Yeah, you'll be getting a copy of the budget for your June discussion. You'll get a copy of the capital improvement plan and the proposed annual budget. So you have both of those
Thank you.
documents. Yeah, absolutely. yeah, tonight was really, as I said, tonight's just a listening session, thoughts, concerns, ideas, things you'd like to see us contemplate. That's it. So,
Okay,
appreciate it.
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Take care. See you soon.
Thank you. Director Clauso, is there anything else that you'd like to add or anything else tonight?
No, Chairman Council, that was it for us today.
Okay. Are there any member items or referrals to staff tonight?
I just have a question, looking at the budget calendar. It appears that this is our meeting for May. Is that correct, or are we still having a meeting next week?
Yes, sir, you still have the May 9th meeting, which will be your quarterly review meeting. Yes, sir.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Question, Wendy, on the minutes, I understand the difficulty of just the physical difficulty of getting those minutes prepared. But it somehow begs the question of whether they're any good to us at all if we get them as late as we've gotten these. So is there a way do we have a way of getting a summary or any information sooner? It doesn't have to be in this form, but some way of taking a look at minutes on, say, the major items that we discussed at a meeting. It'd be helpful if we could come up with some way of doing that.
Well, with the help of the city clerk, we do have a consultant that this is why you're seeing all these minutes come to the catching it up because of the delay just across all commission meetings, not just this one. So we should, get into a more cyclical that it won't be as far behind. They gave us an extra lift because, like I said, it's just an extra workload that's not being, it's almost impossible to do it in that timely manner. But I will ask the city clerk if there's some form, because minutes are official, and so if I'm allowed by charter, or what are my constraints or not, and I'll get you an answer to see what is possible. But I believe I've seen a lot of headway. Doug, you could correct me if I'm wrong, that with this consultant, it's just helped a lot to remove that from the department so that we can actually keep going, and I've seen a lot come forward, so.
Yeah, there was a change in the person doing the minutes. They had changed it at the end of last calendar year. So for that reason, there was the huge delay. And I actually had more minutes I could have added to this agenda, but I didn't want to overwhelm all of you with reading minutes all night. So, I still think you had a hefty amount of, I think, 4 meetings on there. And I think we're still going to have another 5 more meetings to catch up on. So I think I'll be adding those on the next agenda. And then going forward, I think we should have the prior meeting minutes available going forward for each meeting. So it's just a matter of catching up for now because of the change in the minutes person.
So by June, we should be back on a regular schedule of approving the previous minutes.
Yes, I'm not going to make any promises, but I
June, July.
anticipate that's going to be how it will be going forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Other items for the staff? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Got
you.
my gavel back.
Just
I just did.